What does it take to be a champion? It's the summer of 2010. Kobe and the Lakers are coming off a repeat championship. LeBron James and Bosh have just joined forces with Dwyane Wade in South Beach, and the Big Three Celtics remain intact, continuing their pursuit of titles. The attention of NBA fans and analysts is focused on the storied franchises and the rising stars of the league. But in the sweltering heat of Texas, a future first ballot Hall of Famer is flying under the radar. A product of a bygone era, playing for a franchise 4 years removed from contention, nobody cared about Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks, but they should have. The 2011 season would change basketball forever, with a German giant slayer taking on future Hall of Famers, super teams, and all-stars. None of it mattered. Time and time again, doubted over and over, the Mavericks would do the unthinkable. But why was it considered so unthinkable in the first place? In 2006, the Mavericks were one of a handful of Western Conference teams good enough to regularly knock on the door of the NBA Finals, not quite good enough to take down the Shaq and Kobe Lakers or the dynastic Spurs. That said, 2006 was different, with newly appointed head coach Avery Johnson building on the fast-paced offensive system instituted by his predecessor Don Nelson. Dallas rampaged through the league, and their 7-foot power forward was at the center of it all. Number 41's ability to drag rim protectors out of the key and take advantage of his quickness made Dirk Nowitzki a matchup nightmare. Flanking him was Jason Terry, often known as the Jet. Terry was the classic microwave scoring shooting guard, fearless and electric. Add in a do-it-all forward with Josh Howard, and you had a core of an elite NBA team. With Dirk's sweet shooting leading the way, the Mavs cruised through the regular season, notching 60 wins. Heading into the postseason, they may not have been favored, but everybody knew that this was a different Dallas squad. Round 1 saw them make quick work of Pau Gasol and the Grizzlies, but round 2 would be a knockdown, drag-out battle with a familiar foe. Their interstate rivals, the San Antonio Spurs, were once again waiting to put an end to the Mavs' title hopes. In a shocking turn of events, Dallas jumped out to a 3-1 series lead, but games 5 and 6 wouldn't be so kind to the team in blue and white. Whether it was Tony Parker's penetration, Tim Duncan's methodical dominance, or Manu Ginobili's magic, the Spurs seemed to have an answer every time their backs were against the wall. San Antonio had won the 2 games by a combined 6 points, but it didn't matter. The series was tied up, and the Mavs would have to defeat Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, and Popovich in San Antonio in a deciding Game 7. The NBA world prepared for a Suns-Spurs Western Conference Finals, but Dirk Nowitzki had something to say about it. Thanks to a masterful 37-point and 15-rebound performance from their star, Dallas punched their ticket into the Western Conference Finals. After dismissing Nash and the Suns in 6 games, a title seemed well within reach. The Mavs entered the finals as heavy favorites, and a 2-0 lead only propelled the hype, and that's when Dwyane Wade became Dwyane Wade. 4 unforgettable performances by Wade, along with some questionable officiating, and in the blink of an eye, Dallas had suffered one of the most memorable finals collapses in recent history. But what do you do after a 60-win season ends in heartbreak? The only choice is to run it back. In 2007, Dirk and the Mavs were on a mission. The German forward had a career year, averaging 24 points per game while joining the illustrious 50-40-90 club. Dallas entered the postseason as the number 1 seed in the West, with the league MVP leading the charge, but any acceptance speeches would have to wait. Their first-round matchup was against a scrappy, athletic, and undersized Warrior squad led by the Mavs' former head coach Don Nelson. Up until this point, there had only been 2 8 seeds to ever take down a 1 seed, but there was reason to believe in this Golden State squad. Unlike the Mavs, the Warriors didn't have a top 10 player in the league. Baron Davis was still a tremendous point guard, but no one was arguing he was the NBA's premier floor general. Instead, the Dubs found themselves in the playoffs thanks to an unlikely late-season run, fueled by ball movement and pace. 7 different players averaged at least 10 points for Golden State, and their combination of speed and athleticism made them a difficult matchup for Dallas. But this wasn't just any 1 seed. These Mavs had won 67 games, and they were led by the league MVP, who had just taken them to the finals. Sure, they collapsed a year ago, but they had learned. They were better, faster, and more experienced than they were a year ago. They might struggle a little bit with the pace, but no way they could lose. It took 1 game for the country to realize that this series wouldn't be a typical 1-8 beatdown that they were so accustomed to. The Dubs blitzed the Mavs in Game 1, winning by 12 points in Dallas. The Mavs would recover in Game 2, but the Warriors took Game 3 and 4, giving the 8 seed a 3-1 lead. Dallas saved face at home in Game 5, but Game 6 wasn't even a contest. The Dubs demolished the Mavericks by 25 points in front of a raucous Oracle crowd. A week later, Dirk accepted reinvented his MVP after already being eliminated from the playoffs. You could see it in his face. He knew. He knew that all the labels that floated around his name when he was drafted would stick. He knew that this MVP would be reviled and dragged through the mud. And he knew that all of those 127 wins he and the Mavs had accumulated over the past 2 years meant nothing. In the next 3 seasons, Dallas reached the second round once, where they were quickly dismissed by the Nuggets in 5 games. Chokers, frauds, losers. The Mavs had a lot of names, but contender wasn't one of them. At the beginning of the 2010-11 season, expectations for the Mavs were odd. Anything less than a 50-win season would be a disappointment, but no matter the regular season win total, there would be no way Dallas would be seen as a contender. But narratives aside, Dallas had a solid and relatively new rebuilt roster. In 2007, an aging Jason Kidd had moved to Texas and reinvented his game. The now veteran point guard added a spot-up three-point shot to his repertoire to mitigate some of his lost athleticism. Was he an all-star anymore? Of course not, but he was a stable starting point guard with big game experience. In 2009, the Matrix brought his talents to Dallas, but he wasn't really the Matrix anymore either. Sean Marion was still a highly effective defender and reliable complementary player, but that elite athleticism that propelled him to 20 points per game in Phoenix was basically gone. In 2010, the Mavs added Tyson Chandler, a former number 2 overall pick. Chandler had a relatively mixed career. A defensive anchor and offensive finisher, the SoCal native was an effective player everywhere he went, especially alongside CP3 in New Orleans, but many expected more of a hyper-athletic prospect. Rounding out the roster was JJ Barea, a bite-sized pick-and-roll extraordinaire, Deshaun Stevenson, a one-time Michael Jordan successor, and Caron Butler. Butler represented maybe the Mavs' greatest hope at a secondary star to complement Dirk. A year prior, Caron had joined the squad and given them stability at the small forward position, to go along with the efficient 15 points per game. He had proven his scoring pedigree in his days in Washington, and even though he wasn't quite the same player he once was, like many of the other Mavericks, he was a skilled and versatile forward with good size. And last but not least, there was Coach Rick Carlisle. Carlisle began his coaching days in Detroit, where he constructed the early iterations of the defensive-centric Pistons that would end up winning the 2005 NBA championship. Unfortunately, Carlisle couldn't claim that, with an early dismissal in 2003. From there, he headed to Indiana to coach the Pacers until 2007. His tenure in Indy was derailed by the Malice at the Palace incident, which essentially unraveled what was once an elite core. Now entering the 10th year of his head coaching career, Carlisle's greatest accolade was his lone 2001-02 Coach of the Year award. So there it was, an amalgamation of one star, a handful of has-beens and role players, and a coach who most NBA fans couldn't name if they were shown a picture of him. No one envisioned this squad hoisting the Larry O'Brien at the end of the year. At the dawn of the new year, the season was off to an unusual start for Dallas. A 24-8 record was par for the course, but nothing to sneeze at either. Then, in an otherwise non-notable game in Milwaukee, disaster struck. The Mavs' third leading scorer, Caron Butler, went down with an injury. A couple of days later, their worst fears would be confirmed. Butler was out for the year with a ruptured patellar tendon. If you hadn't written them off already, you probably could now. But Dallas did what they could. They kept on marching through the regular season, finishing with 50+ wins again, and securing the 3rd seed in the Western Conference that was, of course, as strong as ever. In round 1, the Mavs would face LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy, and the Portland Trail Blazers. Game 1 and 2 would go in the favor of Dallas, with Dirk pouring in 28 and 33 respectively, but the pendulum would swing once again in Game 3 and 4. Behind 25 from Wesley Matthews in Game 3 and 24 from Brandon Roy, Portland evened up the series, and NBA fans everywhere rolled their eyes. Another collapse, another blown lead. It was the same old Mavs. Even when Dallas rebounded and closed the series out in 6 games, everyone remained unimpressed. Besides, next up was the defending champs, led by the Black Mamba himself. It was only a matter of time before the Mavs were on early vacation once again. Game 1, we were gifted a classic duel between 2 legends. Kobe gave the Lakers 35 points on 50% shooting, but it was Dirk's 28 and 14 boards that would give the Mavs the edge. Game 2 was a 12-point win for Dallas, with Dirk's 24 points leading the way once again. But we had seen these Mavs lose leads like it was their job, and we'd seen number 24 do the impossible like it was his job. 2 games didn't mean anything. Then in Game 3, the German did it again. 32 points on 12 of 19 from the field, and a 6-point win. All of a sudden, it wasn't just a fallible 2-0 lead, it was an untouchable 3-0 lead. The next game in Dallas would blow the Lakers out, completing the improbable sweep of the defending champs and raising eyebrows for the first time since 2007. There was only one Western Conference squad left standing in their way, the new challenger ready to take their place on the throne earlier than anyone could have predicted it, the Oklahoma City Thunder. If there was an antithesis to the Dallas Mavericks in 2011, it was OKC. The Thunder were like a 2K My League team in your fourth year of its rebuild. They'd loaded up on young talent, invested in that said talent, and now were reaping the rewards. And just like in 2K, the rewards were cartoonish. Now, in this fourth NBA season, Oklahoma City's allegedly 6'9" small forward was already the stuff of nightmares. He had just finished leading the league in scoring for the second year in a row, and what's worse is that it all looked effortless. He'd stoically stroll to the perimeter before making a move faster than you could register and smoother than your eyes could catch, and then boom, the ball was in the basket. Of course, the superhuman that was a young Russell Westbrook was the one getting him the ball, and the one stealing it from your point guard. He wasn't quite the triple-double machine he would become, but Russ was a terror on the defensive end, an electric jolt of energy for 42 minutes offensively. Off the bench, there was a barely bearded James Harden. In truth, none of us knew just how good Harden was at the time. A smooth lefty with an answer for whatever you were bringing to the table. Inside, outside, mid-range, it didn't matter. After failing in the past, now the future was here, right in front of the Mavs, preparing to snuff them out once and for all. Everyone knew it. If Dallas didn't beat OKC this year, it sure as hell wouldn't next year. There was a lot of questions of whether or not Dirk would be able to keep his playoff dominance against a high-level defender like Ibaka. It took only one game to answer all of them. 48 points on 12 of 15 from the field and 24 for 24 from the free throw line. It wasn't just Ibaka either. To their credit, OKC saw the way this was heading early. In attempts to slow it down, they threw just about everyone they could at him. During spurts, it was Kendrick Perkins. Even Thabo Cephalosha got a shot, but it didn't matter. The guy with the long blonde hair just wasn't missing. The Thunder rebounded in Game 2 behind 24 from KD and 23 from Harden, but that would be the last game they won in the 2010-11 NBA season. It wasn't just Dirk anymore, it was everyone. Shawn Marion had 18 in Game 3 and 26 in Game 5. Jay Kidd finished with 13 points, 8 assists, and 4 steals in Game 3, and Tyson Chandler was locking down the interior and hauling in rebounds like a madman. And of course, you can't forget about the Jet. But still, the engine of it all was Dirk. Aside from an off night in Game 3, Nowitzki was possessed. The further he got into the postseason, the more lethal his fadeaway had become. You were forced to send doubles, deny, be physical, do whatever you could do to throw him off his game. But the soft European just wasn't playing all that soft anymore. When the final buzzer went off at the end of Game 5, you really felt for the Thunder. They were a young team that played tremendously. They had just run into a gang of almost retired outlaws led by the baddest of them all, German Jesus himself, Dirk fucking Nowitzki. Now only one thing stood in their way. Only one thing prevented legends like Jason Kidd and Shawn Marion from ending their careers with a ring. Only 4 more wins before Tyson Chandler validated his second overall billing. Only one more series and Dirk would force every writer that ever called him a choker, fraud, or soft to write a brand new headline. Nowitzki does it. Mavs are world champions. Unfortunately, that thing happened to be an unstoppable object to their immovable force. In their first year as a team, the Heatles were coming together. After a turbulent beginning to the season, Miami got things figured out, and with the talent they had on the roster, that was a terrifying thing. Full court lobs to LeBron, fast breaks with 2 of the greatest athletes in the game, pick and pops with one of the smoother shooting forwards in the league. Some doubted, many prayed against it, but it was here. LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, and Chris Bosh were here to rightfully claim what so many had already given them before the season even started, the 2011 Larry O'Brien Trophy. Game 1 went the way that we all thought it would. Dirk played great, leading the game with 27 points, with the Heat's big 3 combined for 65 points, and Miami coasted to a win. In Game 2, the teams went back and forth through 3 quarters, but in the 4th, it looked like a reality was starting to set in. With just over 7 minutes to go, a Dwyane Wade 3 gave the Heat a 15-point lead at home. The burst of momentum forced a timeout for Dallas. We'll always wonder what would be said in that timeout. In the 7 minutes that followed, Jason Terry provided time timely bucket after timely bucket. Jason Kidd hit a clutch 3 and moved the ball tremendously. Sean Marion made two-way plays throughout, and Dirk just kept making shots. Finally, with the game tied at 30 seconds, Jason Terry found Dirk off a tremendous Tyson Chandler screen, and Nowitzki buried it. The Heat weren't done. Clutch shooting, Mario Chalmers hit a wide-open corner 3, and the game was tied once again. With time winding down, Nowitzki isolated Chris Bosh on the wing and maneuvered around him to knock down the lefty layup. After Dwyane Wade's running 3 clanked off the rim, Dallas had officially tied it up at 1 apiece. At this point, we all waited for the same old Mavs to do it again, to lose it right when they were their closest, to let us down right when we started to believe, to blow it. But these weren't the same old Mavs, they were just old. With fantastic performances from Dirk, JJ Barea, and Jason Terry, Dallas actually did it. And in the end, they didn't just beat the Heat, they beat them in 6 games. It was an unusual display as confetti fell and the celebration began. The finals MVP ran into the locker room. Thankfully, Mark Cuban and Rick Carlisle followed Nowitzki into the locker room and convinced him to come back out and get the picture that would cover newspapers around the world. Dirk Nowitzki had done it. The Dallas Mavericks were world champions. Dirk had waited patiently. He had pushed himself, improved, failed, gotten back up, and done it all again time after time. We all assumed that time had simply passed him by. His window had closed, and though his career wasn't over, the story of it was. Instead, he became the centerpiece of one of the league's most impressive title runs. They beat 3 50-win teams, went through 9 Hall of Famers, and defeated Kobe, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James. There was nothing left to be said, and nothing more to be nitpicked. A run truly deserving of a real anything is possible moment. So we'll ask again, what does it take to be a champion?